Hello, I'm Professor Ad, and today we're going to look at a second technique of finding common denominators. So this method, unfortunately, doesn't always apply, but when it does apply, it's very handy, very helpful to use. So this method works when one denominator is a multiple of the other denominator, or when the smaller denominator is a factor of the larger denominator. For example, if I look at 1/16 and 5/8, I know that 8 goes into 16. That means a common denominator is going to be 16. So in this case, they want us to find a common denominator and then rewrite each fraction with that common denominator. So one of the reasons this method is particularly nice is that if the common denominator is one of the denominators we have, we only have to convert one fraction. I only have to change this 5/8. So I said that I know that 8 goes into 16. How many times? Well, 16 divided by 8 is 2. Remember whatever I multiply by on the bottom, I've got to multiply by on top. So 5 times 2 is 10. So 5/8 is the same as 10/16, and 1/16 is the same as 1/16. That's it. Let's take a look at this next group. This one has 3 fractions, and that's probably when this technique is really helpful because otherwise you can get some really large common denominators. So in this case, if I compare 4 to 6, 4 doesn't go into 6 nicely. Okay, so that means that 6 isn't going to be a common denominator. But I do know that 4 goes into 48 12 times. And I also know that 6 goes into 48 8 times. So that means that 48 is a multiple of 4, 6, and 8. Or, put another way, 4, 6, and 48 are all factors of 48. That means we have a common denominator of 48. In this case, because we had 3 fractions to start with, we're going to have to rewrite these two. So we had 3/4, and we want to write that to have a denominator of 48. And we also had 7/6 that we want to rewrite to have a denominator of 48. So I said 48 was going to work because I know that 4 times 12 is 48. And I knew that 6 was going to work because 6 times 8 is 48. So to get my new numerators, 3 times 12 is 36, and 7 times 8 is 56. So now my 3 fractions, 3/4, 7/6, and 17/48, I can think of them as 36/48, 56/48, and our 17/48. All right, let's do one more together. So we have 5/12, 11/24, and 3/8. So 24 would be my candidate for the common denominator because it's the biggest one. So let's check to see if the smaller numbers are factors of 24. Does 12 go into 24? Let's see. 24 divided by 12? Yeah, it goes in twice. And does 8 go into 24? Yeah, it goes in 3 times. So that means a good common denominator is going to be 24. So we can rewrite those fractions that didn't have a denominator of 24 so that they have a denominator of 24. So I've got my 5/12 times something, going to give me 24ths. And 3/8 times something is going to give me a denominator of 24ths. We saw that 12 went into 24 2 times, And that 8 went into 24 3 times. So 5 times 2 is 10, and 3 times 3 is 9. So we have 5 twelfths is the same as 10 24ths. 3 eighths is the same as 9 24ths. And 11 24ths is the same as 11 24ths. It doesn't change. So let's compare this method to the method that we talked about in the last video. In the last video, the technique we used was to multiply the two denominators to get the common denominator. And my first example on this page was the same as the second example here. So in this case, our common denominator that we found was 16. In the last video, the common denominator we found for these two was 128. So although the method of getting a common denominator by multiplying denominators super easy, works every time, it can sometimes give you much larger denominators. I mean, 128 is much larger than 16. And the bigger the numbers, the more difficult it's going to become to do operations. However, if I look at that third example that we did on this last video, we had denominators of fourths, sixths, and 15ths. And this new method wouldn't apply here because 4 doesn't go into 6 and 4 doesn't go into 15. So that means the biggest denominator isn't going to work as a common denominator. So just to refresh us here, it worked in this case only because 4 went into 48 and 6 went into 48. So the second method is nice when it works, but unfortunately it doesn't always work. In the next video, we're going to talk about an alternate technique that will always work, and it will always give you the smallest possible denominator that is common to all your fractions. But before we get there, let's do a few problems to try out on your own. So find a common denominator using this method of using a shared multiple for your denominators. So we've got 9ths and 36ths, and then we have 15ths and 45ths. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.